Season 2, Episode 8 of Severance is handily the worst rated episode of the show. I remember watching it with a group of friends and having similar feelings to the general consensus. At the time, I believed I held the opinion that the episode could have been removed entirely, and that its key moments could have been interspersed into the previous episodes, as the multi-episode build-up of wondering what Cobell was up to did not really feel like it was worth it. But over time, I've come to appreciate this episode more, and I disagree with my past self. Severance is a show about a company that invents a procedure that splits your work memories from your home memories, essentially creating two different people in one body. As you can imagine, the show quickly dives into how this is very immoral, and all of the ramifications that this sort of technology and trust in shady corporations would bring. What makes this episode, Sweet Vitriol, special is how it shows the aftermath of the omnipresent company cult Lumen, rather than its consequences playing out in front of us. In a lot of dystopian media, you have these big, loud moments, whether in an audio or visual sense, that scream, "We are living in a society and that society is dystopian." I have no qualms with these, and in fact I love a lot of them. Mad Max Fury Road is one of my favorite films of all time, and that is the line,
"Do not, my friends, become addicted to water."
It also has a character called the Doof Warrior, who has a guitar that doubles as a flamethrower, so I have no reservations with labeling it as a perfect film. But what I've come to also value is storytelling that focuses on the more subtle ways that dystopian aspects can bleed into everyday life. While most of Severance is focused on the active human rights violations that are committed by Lumen, Sweet Vitriol is fixated on what this kind of corporate destruction leaves behind. Child laborers have grown up to become ether addicts that roam streets peppered with worn-down architecture. A general air of distrust permeates throughout its citizens, fueled by a paranoia that Lumen and Kier are always watching. And even after all of this, the sorry state that their town has been left in is not enough for some of its members to continue their cult-like devotion to the company. It is a sad, sad episode that opts for a much less flashy method of storytelling, a decision which makes it all the more bleak. A warning of destruction that big tech companies nonchalantly enact upon everyday people in order to maximize their profits and power. Streaming exclusively on Apple TV. It's not an episode that I'll likely return to often, but I think my initial dismissal of it was a bit misguided. I started thinking about this particular episode while playing through Disco Elysium, a game where you play as a cop with amnesia who has been tasked with figuring out the culprit of a lynching. While a lot of the intrigue is obviously mined from trying to figure out who done it, what's honestly more gripping to me is finding out about this beaten down world and why you wake up in a trashed hotel room with no memories. What makes the onslaught of information feel a bit more palatable instead of just feeling like a never-ending lore dump is how the protagonist's personal history is sprinkled in. Without getting into spoilers, the main guy is a complete mess, and that mess has been seen by a large portion of the Revacholian public. Not to make any personal assumptions about you, the viewer, but if you saw a fraction of his chaos and then saw him again, you would probably start walking the other way. But most of the characters just kind of say something to the effect of, "Man, you were partying pretty hard there." Part of this is obviously so you can play the video game and progress the story, but additionally it's because such events aren't all too notable, and to most it's just sort of a vague annoyance. The response to a lynched, bloated body being unattended for an extended period of time is just sort of a muted, "Ew, that's gross." Similar to Sweet Vitriol, we are seeing a beaten down population who is trying to survive rather than to live. Just seeing a group of husks dying is obviously not the most entertaining matter, which is why it's important that the discovery of the world is made so much more interesting when it's connected to a character's personal life. As much as a movie like Network is great with all these loud, explosive moments connected with biting commentary, I think this is why I was always more of a broadcast news kind of individual. Broadcast news has a classic rom-com type of setup. You have the career-driven Holly Hunter sandwiched between her similarly minded best friend and the hunk that she's more attracted to that goes against some of her values. The newsroom does more than just serve as a mere backdrop though, as Albert Brooks and William Hurt represent the fork in the road that broadcast news has been presented with, either going with the more attractive flashy route that has less substance, or going with the more intellectual news-based news that can also sometimes look like this.
5 seconds!
Fine. State.
Everything's fine, Aaron.
While calling it a dystopia makes other examples look dramatic by comparison, it does show how we will continually lower our standards to new dystopian lows, because we are human and humans are adept at adapting. While the film condemns this kind of world that William Hurt's character is ushering in, no individual is reduced to a mere good guy or bad guy. No character is perfect, far from it, and all of these individuals are a lot less spotless than they would like to admit. It's a pre-apocalypse tale rather than a post-apocalypse one. William Hurt's actions in the film are not really that noble nowadays, but that just shows how far we have sunk in such a short period of time, and how fast we can hurtle to new lows.
What do you think the devil's gonna look like if he's around?
God.
Come on, what's he gonna sound like? He will be attractive, he'll be nice and helpful, he'll get a job where he influences a great God-fearing nation, he'll never do an evil thing, he'll never deliberately hurt a living thing, he'll just bit by little bit lower our standards where they're important.
It's romantic desperation that's fueling Albert Brooks at this point in the movie, but he's not that far off, because that's how it goes a lot of the time. That's how regression occurs. Rarely does it happen in these wild swings, but rather a completely choreographed dance that has been happening for a while. I just started watching Mad Men, a show in which I've been tardy to the party, and a very immediately noticeable aspect is how ingrained a culture of sexism and racism is within its characters. It's kind of one of the main aspects of the show. This is far from the first piece of media to point out the regressive norms of the past, but the way that the show is so blasé about most of it really makes it stand out to me. Now let's look at the other side of things, with characters on the receiving end of injustice. To Sleep with Anger is an insanely underseen film following this family who gets a visit from an old family friend, whose presence adds increasing amounts of tension throughout the film. A lot of films starring black people from this time reduce them to mere victims of racist crimes instead of fully fleshed out people. Typically so a white character could learn that maybe racism isn't all it's cracked up to be. While films that explore racism through racist events aren't bad, because hate crimes and horrible injustices do occur, they can't be the only exploration of racism, because then it opens a door for a lack of explosive events to be marked as the end of prejudice, which is simply not true. To Sleep with Anger is not a film that's explicitly about racism, at least on a surface level, but racism is still ingrained in the culture. Instead of reducing racism solely to overtly racist acts, we only see its effects in these more subtle ways. After there is a death in the household and the proper authorities fail to arrive within a reasonable time to take the body, one character says this:
They just do nothing in the colored neighborhood. If he was white, they'd have had him on his feet and out of here.
I routinely think about this one little throwaway line. Racism is not an event that happens to this family. It is a fact of the world that infects every portion of these characters' lives. Just like the other end of the tone pole with the boys club mentality of the Mad Men ad men. An accepted existence that is harsh and disconcerting. A dystopia which is branded as normal life. Which brings me to Playtime. Now, compared to the examples I've presented before, Playtime is a lot more of a light-hearted affair. You even have plenty of your classic chair makes a funny noise gags. And while it certainly takes a much sillier, comedic tone, I found myself profoundly bummed out by certain portions. A lot of the humor is drawn from the main character Hulo being confused about the world around him. He wanders a sea of cubicles and corporate inefficiencies, where most of the colors of life have been reduced to different shades of gray. It is a very silly movie, the kind of movie where a small plane becomes flaccid, but the criticisms of modern living in the 60s are still fresh decades later. However, unlike some of the dystopias we have seen today, there are bright glimmers of hope in this world. Love and chaos shake people loose from the system, reinvigorated souls get carried away, flames rise and ceilings fall. They are literally tearing down the house because no matter what, there is always hope and there is always joy. This all coexists with an impressive world, providing a message to the viewer that humans will always prevail and the plane will become erect again. All of the examples that I've shown can be more unnerving than more overt dystopias because moral bankruptcy becomes second nature, but it also shows dystopias that are not functionally impossible to change. It's a dead world with life. It's a lot easier functionally to create a healthier environment if all you have to worry about is a bunch of ad dorks instead of a harsh, unforgiving environment at the whims of Immortan Joe and his never-ending army, which, may I remind you, includes the Doof Warrior. This is not to suggest that it's easy to dismantle systems, because it's not, or to minimize any aggressions that happen in these muted dystopias, because they are still very much big, but it is to say that hope should never be lost, and that change is never impossible. It's also to say that Hulo's arc in Playtime is literally me, and that people need to start making Hulo Sigma edits. Thank you for watching.